As the Carthaginians started disembarking on the eastern riverbank, Hanno sent a part of his force to loot and destroy the Kavara's camp, while he personally led the charge against the Gauls near the river. The Kavaras were stunned by the flanking maneuver, and they began fleeing the field in panic, unable to cope with Hannibal's perfectly synchronized attacks. With the Gauls scattered, the battle was soon over, and the Carthaginians hastily proceeded to cross the river. Most of Hannibal's troops crossed the Rhone by the end of the day, while it took another day to get the elephants across the river. While the Carthaginian army gathered on the eastern bank, friendly Gallic messengers from the tribes in the Po Valley arrived, warning Hannibal that a Roman fleet is anchored nearby. Hannibal sent his scouts to locate Scipio's army, and, incredibly, not long after, his Numidian scouts stumbled into a Roman Gallic scouting party. Both generals now knew of each other's whereabouts. Scipio quickly moved north to confront Hannibal, but by the time the Romans reached the crossing point a few days later, only an empty Carthaginian camp was left behind. Hannibal had no time to waste. He had to reach the Alps before the winter. But trouble was brewing in Iberia. Scipio placed his brother, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus, in charge of leading the army into Iberia, while he headed back to the Po Valley to assume command of Roman troops there and prepare for the Carthaginian invasion. Scipio Calvus, now in charge of the invasion force, disembarked at Emporiae. The Greek trading cities and the Iberian tribes in the region welcomed the Romans. But even prior to the arrival of Roman troops, the Carthaginians began to lose control over the conquered region, as Hanno's force wasn't large enough to conduct offensive operations. What's worse, Hanno only learned about the Roman arrival when Scipio Calvus was well on his way towards the Ebro River. He sent word to Hasdrubal, who began marching north with 8,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry. But instead of waiting for Hasdrubal, Hanno marched out with 10,000 troops to meet the 20,000-strong Roman army. Scipio Calvus easily crushed the Carthaginians, killing 6,000 and capturing 2,000 troops, along with Hanno himself. Once Hasdrubal arrived, he didn't have enough troops to meet the Romans in battle, so he launched fast-moving raids along the coast. Carthaginian raiders killed many Roman sailors as they were foraging, reducing the effectiveness of the Roman fleet by half. Nevertheless, Rome now had full control over Iberia north of the Ebro River, a serious blow to the Carthaginian war effort. Moreover, northern Iberia would become a base of operations for Roman incursions into Carthaginian territory south of the Ebro River. Meanwhile, having marched his forces over the Alps, Hannibal would soon turn the Italian peninsula into a war zone, in a campaign that would elevate him to a general of legendary status. It is the year 218 BC. As Roman legions under consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus sail south to invade Carthage itself, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus is consolidating Rome's position in Iberia, while his brother, consul Publius Cornelius Scipio, rushes back to the Po Valley to take command of the Roman army there and stop Hannibal. Both sides are confident of victory. Although the Carthaginians are faced with serious setbacks in Iberia, in Gaul Hannibal speeds up his approach to the Alps when he befriends the Allobroges tribe by adjudicating in a dispute between two royal brothers over who should rule. The seemingly grateful new ruler of the tribe, Brancus the Elder, provides the Carthaginians with supplies, warm clothes, food, and guides. And so begins Hannibal's perilous journey through the Alps. But as the ascent begins, Brancus's friendly guides turn home. Here, Hannibal shows he is as skillful in mind games as he is in generalship. Sensing an ambush, he sends scouts ahead who report that the tribesmen are indeed mustering their forces just ahead on higher ground near their settlement, waiting to attack the passing Carthaginian column. With a select group of experienced troops, Hannibal sneaks up to a position overlooking the tribal settlement and plans his next move. As night falls, he signals his army to proceed marching. Spotting the movement, tribal sentries raise the alarm and, just as Hannibal had hoped, an attack begins on the Carthaginian column. Expecting the impending attack, Carthaginian troops below stand fast on the precipice. A swarm of tribal warriors smashes into their solid defensive line, the initial push throwing many over the cliff's edge. But the Carthaginians hold their ground, and the tribesmen soon realize that they have fallen into a trap. Hannibal rushes downhill, while Carthaginian troops from below simultaneously begin pushing uphill. Many tribesmen are cut down in a matter of minutes, their morale broken by the lightning-fast Carthaginian counterattack. With the enemy driven off, Hannibal and his men turn their attention towards the village. They storm the tribal settlement and seize all of their winter provisions. At dawn, the Carthaginian march resumes. Over the following 3 days, the marching column continues unopposed. But all that changes on the 4th day, as the Carthaginians enter a narrow gorge, where they are met by several tribal chiefs who offer friendship, hostages, and guides. Suspecting that the Gallic tribes from these parts are no friendlier, Hannibal accepts their offer, but takes precautions by secretly moving the vulnerable baggage train and cavalry to the front of the column, and positions his heavy infantry in the rear. As the Carthaginian march continues through the extremely narrow pass, the 200-meter vertical cliffs ominously tower over them. And they are not alone. The Gallic warriors are watching from above. Having set up an ambush further up the gorge, the tribesmen bide their time, shadowing Hannibal's army for 2 days. But suddenly, at a very narrow point in the gorge, the Carthaginian column gets blocked from the front as the tribesmen unleash their attack. Rocks and projectiles rain down from the cliffs above onto the Carthaginians below, killing many in the process. Animals panic and trample over soldiers who hopelessly look for cover. The main Gallic force appears behind the Carthaginian column and charges their rear, expecting weakest resistance there as they hope to loot and destroy their supply train. But again, Hannibal proves he is one step ahead of his opponents, as the heavy Carthaginian infantry he previously placed in the rear pushes back the Gallic charge and inflicts heavy losses on the enemy, forcing them to retreat after a brief battle. Hannibal then urges his men to push forward out of the killing zone, as the barrage of rocks from above continues. It is not until 1 day later that the Carthaginians finally reach safety on the other side of the gorge. The last of the Allobrosia's attacks is beaten off, but the remorseless fighting against the Gallic tribes took its toll on Hannibal's army. To make matters worse, the weather soon turns as winter comes early. Hannibal's troops find themselves battling heavy snowstorms. Traversing through rocky gorges and steep mountain slopes, many are swallowed by treacherous voids lurking just under the snowfall. Men, animals, and wagons slip and slither on the ice towards precipitous ravines and treacherous chasms. Finally, 9 days into the march, the Carthaginians set up camp just below the top of the pass as they wait for stragglers to catch up. 2 days later, Hannibal rallies his troops at the top and points to the panorama of Italy below. There he vows to his men, "You will have the capital of Italy, the citadel of Rome, in the hollow of your hands." And with that, they begin descending towards the Po Valley. But the slopes on the way down are far steeper and largely covered in ice. The treacherous terrain claims the lives of many more troops and animals. Adding to the hardship, a collapsed stretch of road forces the Carthaginian column to stop for 3 days amidst freezing conditions while the road is repaired. But finally, after braving these horrific conditions, the Carthaginians reach the foot of the Alps. Having lost nearly half of his army, Hannibal takes stock of his troops who suffered terribly during the crossing. Of the 45,000 that set off through the Alps just 16 days ago, only 26,000 made it to the other side. There, the Roman army